The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the park. Children played on the swings, their laughter filling the air, while parents sat on benches, chatting and watching over them. Joggers passed by, some with headphones in, lost in their own world. The park felt peaceful, safe, a place where no one expected anything bad to happen. Among the children was Maya Johnson, a 12-year-old girl with curly hair tied into a ponytail. She rode her bike along the paved path, enjoying the cool breeze on her face. The day had been warm, and the wind felt refreshing as she sped up, the wheels of her bike rolling smoothly over the ground. She loved coming to the park, especially in the evenings when the air felt lighter, and the world seemed calmer. Her mother, Angela, had told her to be home before dark. She glanced at her phone and saw she still had time. A few more minutes, she thought. She wasn't ready to leave just yet. Slowing her bike near a small wooden bench, she pulled out her water bottle and took a sip. As she did, she noticed a man sitting alone a short distance away. He looked like he was in his late 30s, wearing a casual jacket and jeans. At first, he didn't seem unusual, just another person enjoying the evening. But something about him made Maya feel uneasy. He wasn't watching the sunset, nor was he focused on a phone or book. Instead, his eyes seemed to follow certain people, mostly children, though he looked away whenever someone noticed him. Maya shook off the feeling and decided it was time to head home. She adjusted her helmet and was about to get back on her bike when she heard a deep voice. "Nice bike," the man said, stepping closer. His smile was friendly, but there was something about his eyes that made Maya uncomfortable. "Thanks," she replied quickly, keeping her voice polite but short. She didn't want to talk. She just wanted to leave. "Do you ride here often?" he asked. Maya didn't answer right away. Something in her gut told her to be careful. She forced a small smile and said, "Sometimes." Then she placed her foot on the pedal, ready to go. Just as she was about to push forward, the man stepped closer, his hand lightly touching her handlebars. "Wait," he said. "I was just wondering." Maya didn't wait to hear the rest. She jerked her bike away and pedaled hard. Her heart pounded as she sped toward the exit of the park. But before she could get too far, a strong grip grabbed the back of her bike seat, stopping her suddenly. Maya gasped as she lost balance, her bike tipping over. She hit the ground, scraping her knee. Before she could scream, a firm hand covered her mouth, and everything around her suddenly felt terrifyingly silent. The peaceful evening at the park was about to take a dark turn. Maya's heart pounded as she struggled against the strong grip. The man's hand was firm over her mouth, muffling the scream that tried to escape. Her bike lay on the ground, its wheels still spinning. She kicked her legs, twisting and turning, but he was too strong. "Stop moving," the man whispered sharply, his voice low and firm. He dragged her backward, away from the main path, toward the trees at the edge of the park. The laughter of other children playing was still in the air, but they were too far to see what was happening. Maya's mind raced. What should I do? Her father had always told her that if she was ever in danger, she needed to stay calm and think. But how could she stay calm when she was being pulled away from safety? She dug her nails into his arm and bit down on his hand as hard as she could. "Ah," he hissed, loosening his grip for a second. That was all she needed. She took a deep breath and screamed as loud as she could. "Help! Help me!" For a moment, she thought someone would hear her. A jogger passing by turned his head, looking in her direction. But before he could react, the man quickly lifted Maya off the ground and carried her toward a parked car. She kicked her feet, thrashing wildly. "Let me go," she yelled, her voice raw with fear. "Be quiet," the man growled, shoving her into the back seat of the car. The door slammed shut, locking her inside. She scrambled for the handle, but there was no way to open it. Child lock. The man rushed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and sped off. Maya pressed her face against the window, hoping someone had seen her, hoping someone would follow. But the park was already behind them, growing smaller and smaller. Back at home, Maya's mother, Angela, glanced at the clock. It was getting late. Maya should have been home by now. She picked up her phone and called her daughter, but it went straight to voicemail. A nervous feeling settled in her stomach. She tried again. No answer. Frowning, she dialed her husband, Captain Robert Johnson, who was still at work. "Robert, Maya isn't home yet," Angela said, trying to keep her voice steady. "She was supposed to be back already." Captain Johnson sat up straight. "Did she call?" "No. I tried her phone, but it's off." Johnson's instincts kicked in. He knew his daughter. She wasn't the kind of child to wander off. And the fact that her phone was off, that was wrong. Very wrong. "I'm coming home," he said. "Stay by the phone. I'll find her." Angela swallowed the fear rising in her throat. Deep down, she already knew something wasn't right, and she knew her husband wouldn't rest until he brought their daughter home. Captain Robert Johnson gripped the steering wheel tightly as he drove home, his mind racing. His heart pounded harder with every passing second. Maya was missing. His little girl, the daughter he had sworn to protect, was out there somewhere, and he had no idea what had happened to her. He had spent years working in law enforcement, solving difficult cases, and chasing criminals. But now, this wasn't just another case. This was his daughter. As soon as he reached home, he found Angela pacing in the living room, her phone in hand, worry written all over her face. "She's still not answering," she said, her voice trembling. "I called her friends, but none of them have seen her." Captain Johnson nodded, his jaw clenched. He pulled out his own phone and made a call. "I need officers at the city park now. My daughter is missing." Within minutes, his team was already at work. Officers arrived at the park, talking to witnesses, searching for any sign of Maya. The security cameras were checked, and soon one of the officers found something. "Captain," an officer said through the radio, "we found footage. You need to see this." Johnson rushed to the park's security office. His heart nearly stopped when he saw the screen. There, on the grainy footage, was Maya. She was riding her bike, stopping for a drink of water. And then, a man approached her. He watched as the stranger spoke to her. Then, in an instant, Maya tried to leave, but the man grabbed her. The footage showed her struggling, trying to break free. The jogger in the background turned to look, but before he could react, the man had already dragged Maya toward a car. Johnson leaned forward, memorizing the details. The man's face, his clothes, the car he was driving. His hands curled into fists. This man had no idea who he had just taken. "Zoom in on that license plate," Johnson ordered. The officers enhanced the image, and the numbers on the plate became clear. One of the detectives ran the plate number through the system, and within seconds, a name popped up. Daniel Reed. Johnson's eyes narrowed. He knew that name. Officer Daniel Reed, a cop with a history of complaints, suspicious behavior, accusations of using excessive force, and other reports that had somehow always been dismissed. His own police badge felt heavy on his chest. A fellow officer had done this. "Where does he live?" Johnson asked, his voice like steel. The detectives pulled up his address. A house just outside the city. Johnson didn't wait. He grabbed his radio. "All units, we have a suspect. I want officers at Daniel Reed's house now. This man has my daughter, and we are bringing her home." As the sirens blared through the city, Captain Johnson's eyes burned with one thought. He would stop at nothing to save Maya. Maya sat in the back seat of the moving car, her breath coming in short gasps. Her hands were shaking, but she tried to stay calm. "Think, Maya, think." Her father always told her that in dangerous situations, the smartest thing she could do was pay attention and look for a way out. The man driving, the one who had taken her, kept his eyes on the road. He wasn't saying anything now, but Maya could see his grip tightening on the steering wheel. His knuckles were white. He was nervous about something. The car moved out of the city, passing rows of buildings before reaching quieter roads. Fewer streetlights, fewer people. Where is he taking me? Maya thought, panic rising in her chest. She glanced at the door handles. Locked. She looked at the windows. They wouldn't roll down. Her heart pounded. The car turned onto a long, empty road surrounded by trees. It was getting darker now, and the road stretched ahead like a never-ending tunnel. Maya swallowed hard. Stay calm. Pay attention. The man finally spoke. You don't need to be scared, he said, though his voice didn't sound comforting. I just need some time to think. Maya didn't answer. Instead, she looked around the car, memorizing everything. The dashboard, the buttons, even a small tear in the seat. Every little detail mattered. Then she spotted something near the front. A small police radio on the passenger seat. Her eyes widened. Was it working? If she could just get to it. The car slowed as it approached an old dirt path. The man sighed and ran a hand through his hair, looking around as if making sure no one was following. Then he turned onto the path, leading deeper into the woods. Maya knew she was running out of time. Meanwhile, Captain Johnson was racing against the clock. His team had already surrounded Daniel Reed's house, only to find it empty. The car they had seen in the footage was nowhere in sight. Johnson's frustration grew. He's not here, one officer confirmed over the radio. Then where did he take her? Johnson muttered, his mind working fast. That's when he remembered. Reed had once worked in a rural area outside the city. Johnson had heard rumors about an abandoned cabin in those woods, a place where people used to go for training but was no longer in use. His instincts told him that's where Reed was going. Johnson grabbed his radio. I need every available unit searching the roads near Westwood Forest. He could be heading to an abandoned cabin in that area. We do not stop until we find Maya. As sirens filled the night, Maya knew one thing. Her father would come for her. She just had to hold on. Maya's heart pounded as the car bumped along the dirt road, moving deeper into the forest. The trees stood tall on both sides, their dark shadows stretching across the path. It was quiet here, too quiet. No houses, no streetlights, no people, just the sound of the car engine and the rustling of leaves in the wind. She forced herself to stay calm. Don't panic. Think. The man driving, Officer Daniel Reed, wasn't talking much now. His grip on the steering wheel was tight, and he kept checking the rearview mirror, looking for something or someone. Maya knew her father must have realized she was missing by now. He had probably seen the security footage. He must be looking for me. But would he know where to find her? She needed to do something. Fast. Her eyes flickered toward the police radio on the passenger seat. If it was turned on, maybe she could send a message. But how could she reach it? Then the car hit a deep hole in the road, making it jerk hard. The sudden movement knocked a few things off the seat, including the radio. It landed right next to her foot. Maya held her breath. This is my chance. Carefully, she slid her foot over it, pulling it closer without making any sudden movements. Reed didn't seem to notice. He was too busy looking ahead, concentrating on the road. Maya bent down slightly, pretending to scratch her leg. But in reality, she was reaching for the radio. Her fingers wrapped around it. It was cold, heavy. She had seen her father use a police radio many times. She knew what to do. Press the button. Speak clearly. Use the right words. She took a deep breath and pressed the transmit button. This is Maya Johnson, she whispered, keeping her voice low so Reed wouldn't hear. Please help me. I'm in a car with Daniel Reed. We're in the woods. Please, Daddy, find me. She released the button and waited. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then, static. And then, a voice. Maya. It was her father's voice. Strong, sharp, filled with urgency. Reed's head snapped toward her. He had heard it too. Maya's heart skipped a beat. He knows. Reed's face darkened. What did you just do? Maya didn't answer. She gripped the radio tight. pressing the button again. "Daddy, I'm here. I'm in." Before she could finish, Reed snatched the radio from her hand and threw it against the dashboard. It cracked but still made a faint buzzing sound. His hands tightened into fists. He knew he was in trouble now. Maya pressed herself against the door. She had done it. Now, all she had to do was wait, because she knew one thing for sure. Her father was coming, and he was coming fast. Daniel Reed gritted his teeth, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His plan had gone terribly wrong. Maya had used the police radio. Now, every officer in the city knew where she was. Her father knew. Reed's heart pounded. He pressed harder on the gas pedal, making the car speed up. The road was rough, full of dips and bumps, but he didn't care anymore. He just needed to get somewhere safe before they caught him. Maya sat frozen in the back seat, her breath shallow. She had done everything she could. Now she had to hold on. She stole a glance at Reed. He looked panicked now, his face tense. "He knows my dad is coming." That gave her a small spark of hope. But what will he do next? Suddenly, Reed grabbed his phone and started dialing. Pick up," he muttered under his breath. But whoever he was calling didn't answer. He cursed under his breath and threw the phone onto the seat. Maya swallowed. He's scared. He's losing control. That meant she still had a chance. Then, in the distance, a faint sound reached her ears. Sirens. Maya's heart jumped. They're close. Reed heard it too. His eyes flickered to the rearview mirror. Flashing lights appeared behind them. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. He yanked the steering wheel hard, making the car swerve off the road and onto a small hidden path. Maya was thrown to the side, hitting her shoulder against the door. Pain shot through her arm, but she bit her lip, forcing herself not to cry out. "Stay strong, just a little longer." Reed kept driving, weaving between trees, trying to escape. But the sirens were getting louder, closer. Then another sound. A helicopter. Its powerful searchlight cut through the trees, sweeping across the forest like a giant eye. Maya gasped. They'd brought a helicopter. That means Dad is really close. Reed cursed again. He knew he was trapped. Then, without warning, he slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop, kicking up dirt and leaves. Before Maya could react, Reed jumped out and threw open her door. "Come on," he growled, grabbing her wrist. "We're going on foot." Maya struggled, pulling back with all her strength. "No, let me go." She kicked at him, trying to break free, but he was still too strong. He dragged her toward the trees, moving fast, his breath coming in short gasps. But then, a voice rang out through the night. "Daniel Reed, stop right there." Maya's heart nearly burst with relief. It was her father. Captain Johnson had arrived. And this time, he wasn't letting her go. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Her father was here. The flashing red and blue lights lit up the dark forest as police cars screeched to a stop. Officers poured out, their flashlights cutting through the trees. The loud whir of the helicopter overhead made the leaves tremble. Daniel Reed's grip on her wrist tightened. His body tensed. He knew he was outnumbered. Captain Robert Johnson stepped forward, his voice strong and steady. "Daniel, let her go." Reed's breathing was heavy. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but there was nowhere to run. "Put your hands up," an officer ordered, his gun pointed straight at Reed. More officers surrounded him, their faces set with determination. Maya's heart pounded. Would Reed listen? Or would he try something reckless? For a moment, silence filled the air. Tense. Unbreakable. Then, Reed made a choice. In one swift move, he yanked Maya in front of him, using her as a shield. "Back off," he shouted, his voice filled with desperation. "Stay where you are, or I'll." He didn't finish, because Maya had been waiting for this moment. She stomped hard on his foot and threw her elbow into his stomach, just like her father had taught her. Reed let out a gasp of pain, his grip loosening just enough. Maya didn't hesitate. She ripped herself free and ran toward her father. "Daddy!" she cried, her legs shaking. Johnson lunged forward, catching her in his arms. He hugged her tight, his strong arms wrapping around her like a shield. "You're safe now, baby," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I've got you." Maya buried her face in his chest, relief washing over her like a wave. Reed tried to stumble backward, but the officers were already on him. They tackled him to the ground, pinning his arms behind his back. "Daniel Reed, you are under arrest," an officer announced as they secured the handcuffs. Reed struggled, but it was useless. His fight was over. Maya clung to her father, her body shaking from everything that had happened. "You did great," Johnson murmured, brushing her hair back gently. "I'm so proud of you." Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears, but also strength. She had been scared. She had been taken. But she had fought back. And now she was safe. The officers led Reed away, his head hanging low. Justice would be served. Captain Johnson held Maya close as they walked toward the police car. "Let's go home," he said softly. Maya nodded, knowing one thing for sure. She was finally safe in her father's arms. Maya sat in the back seat of the police car, wrapped in a warm blanket. The flashing red and blue lights lit up the trees around them. She could still hear the faint hum of the helicopter above as officers moved around, talking into their radios. Her father, Captain Johnson, sat beside her, his arm protectively around her shoulders. She leaned against him, feeling safe for the first time since she had been taken. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" he asked softly. Maya nodded, though she still felt shaken. "I was really scared," she admitted. "I know," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "But you were brave, Maya. You fought back. You helped us find you." He kissed the top of her head. "I am so proud of you." She managed a small smile. "I knew you would come." Johnson's heart ached at her words. Nothing in the world could have stopped him from finding her. A few feet away, Daniel Reed was being led into a police car, his hands tightly cuffed behind his back. His face was blank, but his eyes held regret. His career was over. His choices had caught up to him. Justice was finally being served. One of the officers walked over to Johnson and nodded. "He's in custody, sir. We'll take care of the rest." Johnson exhaled, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. It was over. Another car pulled up, and Angela Johnson, Maya's mother, rushed out. Her eyes were full of worry as she ran toward them. "Maya," she cried, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. "Mom." Maya held on, breathing in her mother's familiar scent. It felt like home. Angela pulled back, cupping Maya's face in her hands. "Are you hurt?" "Did he?" "I'm okay, Mom," Maya reassured her. "Dad got there in time." Angela's eyes filled with tears. She turned to her husband, her voice shaking. "Thank you." Johnson simply nodded. No words were needed. The family stood together, holding each other as the last of the officers finished up at the scene. The nightmare was over, and Maya was safe. As they drove home, Maya looked out the window at the dark trees passing by. Just hours ago, she had been trapped in that forest, unsure if she would make it back. Now she was going home. That night, as she lay in her bed, warm and safe, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Dad." In the next room, Captain Johnson sat awake, listening to the quiet sounds of the house. He knew his job as a police officer was never easy. But tonight, as a father, he had done what mattered most. He had brought his daughter home.